There comes a point in your life when you no longer crave attention. You crave peace. Not the kind of peace that's picture perfect on the outside, but the kind that lets you sleep deeply at night because nothing is haunting your mind. The kind that lets you walk away, not because you're weak, but because you finally had enough of chaos disguised as connection. Truth is, peace isn't something we stumble into, it's something we protect. And what steals it most often isn't the big explosions, it's the quiet, daily habits we allow to linger, the overthinking, the pleasing, the pretending, the need to be understood by people who never tried to understand us. If you want peace, real, grounded, lasting peace, you have to stop chasing and start releasing. Not with noise, not with explanations, but with silence. In this video, we'll go through 9 habits that may seem invisible, but are costing you everything. And we'll do what few dare to do. Let them go, one by one, without saying a word. If this message speaks to something you've been feeling lately, that quiet pull toward peace, that silent strength growing inside you, then you're not alone. This space was made for people like you. So take a moment, if you haven't already, to subscribe. Not for the numbers, but so this kind of stillness finds you again when you need it most. And if you've ever had to walk away from something or someone to protect your peace, share your story below. You never know who might read it and realize they're not the only one letting go in silence with power. 1. Eliminate the need to always be right. There's a silent war that many people fight daily, not against others, but inside their own minds. The desperate need to always be right. At first glance, it seems harmless. After all, who doesn't want to be correct? But dig deeper, and you'll find that this obsession with being right is rarely about truth. It's about control. It's about fear. And more often than not, it's about ego. That part of us that believes losing an argument means losing value. In reality, the constant pursuit of being right is one of the quietest destroyers of peace. It doesn't explode, it erodes. It doesn't scream, it whispers doubts into every conversation, turns every disagreement into a battlefield, and every moment of misunderstanding into a silent storm. It's not just exhausting, it's isolating. And the worst part? Most people don't even realize they're doing it until the damage is done. You've likely felt it. That sudden tension rising in your chest when someone challenges your opinion, that internal rush to respond, to correct, to defend. And if you pause long enough, you might notice you're not defending truth, you're defending your identity. Because somewhere along the way, we started tying our worth to how correct we are. And so we argue, not to understand, but to survive. But here's where the silent danger lies. Every time you insist on being right, you risk being distant. You push people away without meaning to. You choose the illusion of control over the opportunity for connection. You may win the argument, but lose the relationship. You may prove your point, but silence a heart. And in that moment, you've traded something sacred, peace, for something hollow, pride. In Stoic philosophy, this is where clarity begins. The Stoics never sought to prove their brilliance. They sought to practice it in silence. Marcus Aurelius wrote not to convince others, but to realign himself. Epictetus reminded us, if you already think you know, you've already closed the door to learning. And that's exactly what the need to be right does. It makes you deaf to truth, blind to nuance, and numb to the quiet signals of humility. It isn't a strength to argue over everything. It's strength to know when not to. To recognize the moment where you could speak, but choose stillness instead. Not out of defeat, but out of discipline. Think about how different your relationships would feel if you let go of the need to win. How many late-night arguments would have ended in peace instead of silence? How many times could you have listened instead of reacted? You don't have to agree with someone to hear them. And you don't have to speak over them to prove your intelligence. Silence, when practiced with intention, speaks volumes. It's a mark of emotional self-mastery, one of the highest Stoic virtues. Because in the quiet, you can feel your ego soften. In the stillness, you can hear your own growth echoing back. I once knew a man who argued with everyone, his wife, his kids, his coworkers. He was brilliant, sharp, articulate, but also lonely. He didn't understand why his teenage son stopped opening up. Why does his wife withdraw in conversations? Why do his colleagues avoid meetings with him? It wasn't until his daughter said one sentence, just one, that everything shifted. She looked at him and said, "You're always right, Dad, but no one feels heard around you." That moment broke something, not in a painful way, but in a necessary one. He didn't respond that day. For the first time, he didn't try to justify or explain. He just listened. And in that silence, he found a mirror. Not of who he was, but of who he could be. He started practicing restraint, started asking more than answering. And slowly, without saying it aloud, his family began returning to him. That's the quiet transformation silence offers, the kind of change that doesn't demand recognition, but creates reconnection. So if you feel constantly at odds with others, if conversations leave you drained, if your peace feels brittle, ask yourself this: is it truth you're chasing, or just the comfort of being right? Because there is no freedom in always needing to win. There's only pressure. But when you step out of that pressure, when you let go of the impulse to prove, you start to feel lighter. You begin to see the people in front of you, not as opponents, but as mirrors. And most of all, you begin to reclaim your inner stillness. Not by shouting over others, but by finally choosing not to. Let them have the last word. Let them walk away thinking they've won. Let silence speak on your behalf. Because peace isn't found in being right. It's found in being free. 2. Let go of the obsession to control everything. Control feels safe. It gives the illusion that if you plan enough, prepare enough, and anticipate enough, you'll be protected from the chaos of life. But life doesn't work that way. No matter how many calendars you color code, how many conversations you rehearse in your head, or how many outcomes you try to predict, life remains beautifully, painfully, uncontrollably alive. The obsession to control is a silent prison. It keeps you busy, but never at peace. It makes you efficient, but not free. And the worst part is, it disguises itself as responsibility. You think you're being strong, being proactive. But underneath it all, you're just afraid of what might happen if you finally loosen your grip. That fear is heavy. It's the reason your shoulders stay tense at night. It's why your mind races with what-ifs when all you want is rest. It's why you find yourself snapping at small things, overreacting to delays, and growing anxious when things don't go as planned. But none of it is really about the traffic or the spilled coffee or the silence after a text. It's about something deeper, your need for certainty in a world that doesn't owe you any. And the more you cling to that certainty, the more you suffer. Because every moment becomes a battle to bend reality into the shape you expect. And when it doesn't fit, which it often won't, you feel like you've failed. But you haven't failed. You've just tried to control what was never yours to hold. In the Stoic tradition, control is not about domination, it's about distinction. The distinction between what is up to you and what is not. And that is where your strength begins. When you stop trying to micromanage the universe and start managing your own mind, you come home to yourself. That shift is quiet. It doesn't require announcements. No one needs to see you meditate on the subway or let go of resentment mid-conversation. But inside, something softens. Something opens. Something powerful begins to breathe. You start to notice your own thoughts instead of being ruled by them. You start to pause before reacting, to question the need to fix everything, to allow space for others to be who they are, even when it frustrates you. There's a man I used to know, a small business owner, mid-40s, who ran everything like clockwork. His employees feared his standards. His family rarely relaxed around him. Everything had to go his way. The dinner plans, the vacation routes, even the thermostat settings. He didn't shout, but the pressure of his expectations filled every room. One day, a supply chain collapse threw his entire operation off course. Orders delayed, clients angry, staff overwhelmed, and for once, he couldn't control a thing. I remember meeting him a week later, sitting on the porch, silent. No phone, no emails, just still. He looked at me and said, "I thought control was power, but I've never felt more at peace than now when I've got nothing to grip." That moment changed him. Not because life became easier. It didn't. But because he stopped trying to choke life into submission. He started working with reality, not against it. And that's the invitation here. To stop fighting what flows. To stop being the dam that holds everything back, and start being the river that moves with what is. You will still plan, you will still care, you will still lead. But you'll do it without fear, without panic, without the compulsion to manipulate every detail. And when things fall apart, as they sometimes will, you won't. Because your peace no longer depends on perfection. It depends on presence. Ask yourself right now, what am I gripping that no longer serves me? Whose emotions am I trying to manage? What outcomes am I forcing? What am I trying to prove by being in control? These aren't easy questions, but answering them quietly, honestly, will begin to unravel the tight knots inside you. And as they loosen, you'll notice something else. Space. Space to breathe, to feel, to live without the constant tension of trying to hold the whole world together. Let it fall where it may. Let others take their own path. Let the day unfold without clenching your fists. The sky won't collapse. The world won't fall apart. And even if it does, you'll be standing, not because you predicted it, but because you were anchored in what truly matters. Your response, your presence, your peace. That's the only control that ever mattered. Everything else was just noise. Let it go, quietly, and watch what comes alive when you do. 3. Stop comparing your life to others. Comparison is a silent thief. It doesn't knock at the door or announce its arrival. It slides in quietly through a scroll, a photo, a passing comment, and begins to rearrange how you see your own life. One moment you're content with your pace, your path, your quiet progress. Next you feel small, slow, behind. It happens that fast. And the worst part, you don't even notice it's happening until you're already doubting everything you've built. This isn't just a social media issue. This is a human issue. We are wired to measure, to scan, to compare. The Stoics knew this, but they also knew that measuring yourself by someone else's standard is the fastest way to lose your own direction. I've done it more times than I care to admit, watching someone younger reach milestones I hadn't touched, seeing friends celebrate wins while I was still working quietly in the background. And in those moments, it felt like life had forgotten me, like I was being punished for not moving fast enough. But that feeling, deep down, had nothing to do with them. It was me, looking at someone else's path and forgetting the soil under my own feet. That's the real danger of comparison. It tricks you into abandoning your own lane, into resenting your roots, into doubting the slow growth that doesn't post itself online. It disconnects you from your own values, your own season, your own voice. And once you're disconnected, you start chasing shadows, trying to look like someone else's idea of success, happiness, beauty, impact. But no shadow ever made anyone feel whole. It only made them feel hollow, like they were running but not arriving, working but not building, living but not breathing. There was a time when I nearly gave up on writing. I had spent months building a project I was proud of. It was slow, thoughtful, quiet, like planting something I hoped would last. Then I saw someone else launch something similar. Bigger budget, more followers, flashier. And instantly, that quiet pride inside me turned into embarrassment. Doubt crept in like smoke. I asked myself, why even continue? But after a few days of silence, I did something simple. I went for a walk without my phone. No input, no noise, just me and my thoughts. And as I walked, something shifted. I remembered why I started, not to impress, not to compete, but to serve, to speak, to create something that felt honest. And just like that, the fog cleared. I returned, not with louder ambition, but with clearer intention. I stopped watching their lane and returned to my own. That's the shift comparison steals from you. Peace. When you're always looking sideways, you forget to look inward. You forget that your life has its own rhythm, its own wisdom. You forget that patience is a form of strength, that stillness is sometimes more courageous than speed. You forget that the person you were 10 years ago would be deeply proud of who you are today, even if the world hasn't noticed yet. And you forget that peace doesn't come from winning the race. It comes from realizing there's no race at all. The Stoics remind us, what's meant for you won't pass you by. That's not an excuse for inaction. It's a foundation for alignment. It means your energy is better spent cultivating your own garden than envying someone else's harvest. Because what blooms for them may not even survive in your soil. And that's okay. You weren't made to mirror. You were made to root, to rise, to unfold in your own time. So if lately you've felt behind, unseen, stuck, maybe the problem isn't where you are. Maybe it's where you're looking. Real growth is quiet. Real change is personal. And real peace begins the moment you choose to stop measuring your life with someone else's ruler. You don't need to move faster. You need to move true. You don't need to catch up. You need to come back to your own values, your own truth, your own way. Because when you finally stop comparing, something sacred happens. You stop performing. You start living, not to impress, but to align, not to prove, but to become. So breathe, unfollow, unplug. Step away from the noise long enough to hear your own rhythm again. It's still there, and it's not too late to return to it, quietly, boldly. Now, 4. Drop the habit of constant self-justification. There is a certain kind of silence more powerful than any defense. The silence of someone who no longer explains themselves. Not out of arrogance, not because they don't care, but because they finally understood that peace is not found in endless explanation. It's found in choosing yourself without apology. We live in a world that demands reasons. You change your path, and the questions begin. You choose solitude, and the assumptions follow. You say no, and suddenly you're required to offer a thesis of justification. Somewhere along the way, we were taught that every decision we make needs to be defended, especially when it doesn't please others. That our worth is tied not only to our actions, but to how well we explain those actions. And so we start narrating our lives like lawyers in a courtroom. Every boundary becomes a debate. Every pause needs proof. Every change must be neatly packaged in an explanation, preferably one that makes everyone else comfortable. But here's what no one tells you. The more you explain yourself, the more you train your nervous system to seek permission. You stop asking, is this right for me? And start wondering, will they understand? Will they approve? You become a stranger to your own clarity, your own calm, constantly translating your choices into something acceptable to others. And yet, the irony is, those who truly see you, who respect your path, they don't need the story. They feel your truth without the performance. And those who don't? No explanation will ever be enough. Self-justification is a form of inner noise. It starts small, a sentence here, a comment there. But over time, it becomes chronic. You leave conversations replaying what you said, wondering if you sounded harsh. You draft texts in your head over and over just to explain why you need space, rest, and change. And all the while, your mind is burning energy on something that should have ended with a simple truth. This is what I need right now. That's enough. In the Stoic way, stillness isn't just about what you avoid, it's about what you stop performing. The Stoics didn't chase approval. They cultivated alignment. What mattered wasn't how others perceived their choices, but whether those choices reflected their values. In silence, they stood firm, and it's in that quiet certainty that true power lives. Not in loud defenses, but in calm self-trust. If you've ever felt the urge to explain your every move, you're not alone. That urge comes from a place of wanting to be understood, which is human. But peace isn't found in being understood by everyone. It's found in being honest with yourself and letting that honesty speak through your actions, not your words. You don't need to argue for your freedom. You just need to live it. This doesn't mean cutting people off or shutting down communication. It means being so rooted in your own clarity that you no longer feel the need to bend it into something digestible for others. It means recognizing when an explanation is helpful and when it's just your fear of being misjudged speaking louder than your intuition. And most of all, it means trusting that the right people don't need to be convinced. The first time I chose not to explain a major decision, I felt the tremble of silence, the awkwardness, the invisible pressure to fill the gap with words. But I let it be. I let the space exist. And in that space, I found something I hadn't felt in years. Relief. Not from conflict, but from the weight of pretending, from the constant rehearsing, from the need to shape myself into someone others would always approve of. That moment became a quiet turning point. Not one I announced, just one I lived. So today, if you feel the pull to defend your rest, your healing, your distance, your boundaries, pause. Not every why deserves an answer. Not every silence is rude. Some are sacred. Some are the doorway to real peace. You don't owe the world a footnote for your growth. You don't need a disclaimer for your happiness. And you certainly don't have to justify becoming someone more honest, more whole, more you. Walk quietly, stand gently, choose without noise. And watch how everything unnecessary begins to fall away. Not because you pushed, but because you stopped explaining. 5. Stop seeking validation or applause. There's a strange kind of emptiness that follows when no one notices something you poured your heart into. You do the right thing. You go the extra mile. You show up when no one else will. And then silence. No thank you. No praise, just the quiet echo of your own effort. And in that moment, it's easy to wonder, what's the point of doing good, of showing up if no one sees it? But that question reveals the trap. Doing in order to be seen. That's not virtue. That's dependency. It places your inner peace on the shifting sands of other people's reactions. And the truth is, those reactions are rarely enough. One compliment turns into a hunger for two. A round of applause fades, and you're already searching for the next stage. It becomes an endless loop of proving, performing, and pleasing. And the more you feed it, the more it consumes you. I remember someone close to me who used to post everything she did, every act of generosity, every small victory, every moment of discipline. She told me, if I don't share it, it feels like it didn't happen. And I understood, because there was a time I felt the same. Like a tree falling in the forest, if no one hears it, does it matter? But the Stoic answer is simple, it does. Precisely because you heard it, because you did it. Because integrity doesn't need a spotlight. It needs only a steady heart. The Stoics believe that your character is forged not in the grand gestures, but in the daily, quiet acts no one sees, watering the soul like a garden, consistent, patient, unseen. They practiced what is right because it is right, not because it is recognized. They didn't deny emotion, but they mastered the need for external reward. They found strength in being invisible to the world, but fully known to themselves. And that is the essence of real peace. Being able to walk away from applause and still feel whole. I once met a man who worked as a hospital janitor. Night shifts, minimal pay, no attention, no praise, and yet he showed up with the kind of quiet joy you don't fake. I asked him once what kept him going. He smiled and said, "Because I know this place is cleaner when I leave than when I arrived." That's enough. That sentence never left me. In a world obsessed with metrics, with applause, with followers and validation, he reminded me of something sacred. Doing your part, without needing a witness, is the highest form of freedom. When you stop seeking validation, you stop bargaining with your soul. You stop tailoring your actions to win approval. You stop shaping your voice to fit what others want to hear. And instead, you begin to live with alignment, quiet, firm, rooted. You start choosing the good not because it's noticed, but because it's needed. You start loving not to be loved back, but because love is what you are made of. You start walking your path not because it's popular, but because it's yours. And yes, the silence can be uncomfortable at first. You might feel invisible, unappreciated, alone. But stay there a little longer. Let it cleanse you. Let it show you what's real. Because in that stillness, you'll find something applause can never give. Self-respect. Not the kind that comes from being praised. The kind that comes from looking in the mirror and knowing you didn't fold. You didn't fake. You didn't chase the crowd. You stayed true. When that shift happens, your work becomes your prayer. Your kindness becomes your offering. Your discipline becomes your quiet rebellion against the noise of the world. You don't stop caring. You simply stop performing. You don't stop connecting. You simply stop begging to be seen. And slowly the pressure lifts. The need fades. And in its place comes peace. Not the kind handed to you, but the kind built with your own hands. Let others scroll. Let them chase the likes, the applause, the spotlight. Let them wonder what you're doing. You don't need to answer. You don't need to explain. Just keep showing up. Keep building. Keep becoming. Quietly. Steadily. With your head down, your heart open, and your peace intact. Because real power isn't in being seen. It's no longer needed to be. 6. Free yourself from emotional guilt and over-responsibility. There's a kind of fatigue that sleep doesn't fix. The kind that comes from constantly carrying what was never yours to hold. It's the weight of everyone's expectations, everyone's disappointments, everyone's silence. It creeps in slowly, disguised as care. But over time it hardens into guilt, into a quiet belief that if someone's upset, you must have done something wrong. If someone's hurting, it must somehow be your fault. And so you begin to live not as yourself, but as an emotional caretaker for the entire world. This is not kindness. This is bondage. It's the invisible leash that pulls you away from your own center, one quiet guilt trip at a time. You say yes when your body says no. You You smile when your soul wants silence. You apologize for simply existing differently than expected. And each time, a piece of you steps back, makes room, gives way, until one day you look around and realize you've vanished from your own life. The Stoics spoke of boundaries, not in the modern therapeutic sense, but in the sacred recognition of what belongs to you and what does not. You are not the keeper of someone else's emotional storm. You are not responsible for their reactions, their moods, or their unresolved pain. You are responsible for your character, your response, your integrity. And when you start protecting that space, quietly but firmly, something powerful happens. You stop trying to fix the unfixable, and you start reclaiming your peace. This shift is not easy, especially for those raised to believe that love means sacrifice without limit. That being good means being endlessly available. That saying no is a form of betrayal. And yet living like that doesn't lead to peace. It leads to resentment, to burnout, to a hollow kind of existence where you're always managing everyone else's emotions while ignoring your own. That is not a strength. That is slow erosion. There was a time in my own life when I thought being dependable meant always saying yes, always showing up, always making things right. But slowly, I began to notice something. The people I was bending for weren't changing. They were just expecting more. And I was the one growing tired, growing small, growing bitter. Not because I didn't care, but because I had forgotten how to care for myself. I had confused guilt with goodness. And that confusion was stealing my peace. What saved me wasn't a dramatic confrontation. It wasn't an angry declaration. It was silence. It was the quiet decision to stop explaining, stop apologizing, stop rescuing. To breathe before saying yes, to pause before absorbing someone else's emotion as my burden, to ask with honesty, is this mine to carry? And most of the time the answer was no. That awareness became my freedom. The truth is, emotional over-responsibility is often a form of control. It sounds compassionate, but at its core, it's fear. Fear of being disliked, fear of conflict, fear of being seen as selfish. So we soften, we shrink, we accommodate. And in doing so, we slowly lose touch with our truth. The irony is, when you stop trying to control how others feel, you become more trustworthy, not less. Because you're no longer manipulating your presence to earn love, you're offering your presence as it is. Real, grounded, whole. This is what emotional self-mastery means. Not coldness, not detachment, but discernment. The ability to know where you end and someone else begins. The strength to say, I see your pain, but I will not drown in it. I can stand beside you, but I will not disappear for you. This kind of boundary doesn't push people away. It invites true connection, because it comes from clarity, not performance. So if you've been carrying the weight of everyone's emotions, if guilt has become the background noise of your days, it's time to step back into yourself. Quietly. You don't need to announce your boundaries. You don't need to justify your shift. Just begin. Let your silence speak. Let your stillness become the line that protects your spirit, because the world doesn't need you exhausted. It needs you really. And the people who truly value you will adjust. Those who cannot were never asking for you. They were asking for your compliance. And you were never born to be someone else's emotional cushion. You were born to walk upright, speak your truth, and live from a place of inner steadiness. You can still love deeply without losing yourself. You can still be generous without abandoning your needs. And you can still show up, but this time, for you first. Quietly, fully, now. 7. Break free from the prison of old resentment. Resentment doesn't scream, it whispers. It hides behind polite smiles, behind calm answers, behind phrases like, I'm over it, or it's fine. But deep down, it festers. Quiet, persistent, invisible to others, yet loud within you. And the longer you hold on to it, the more it wraps itself around your life, not as a memory, but as a weight. A silent anchor that drags your spirit down every time it tries to rise. What makes resentment so dangerous is that it wears the mask of righteousness. It tells you you're justified, that your pain matters. Remembering what they did protects you from being hurt again. It convinces you that letting go means letting them off the hook. But that's the lie. Letting go doesn't release them, it releases you. It doesn't erase what happened. It just stops giving it the power to shape what happens next. In the philosophy of the Stoics, freedom is not about changing the past or controlling others. It's about changing what you choose to carry. Resentment is heavy. It clings to the mind like fog, clouding your clarity. It shows up in your tone, your decisions, and your energy. You think you're over it, but it leaks into how you trust, how you forgive, how you open up. It's not just a memory, it becomes a habit of the heart. That's why it must be dropped in silence. Not because it doesn't deserve a voice, but speaking about it over and over again keeps it alive, keeps it fed, keeps it close. Some things must be released not through words, but through stillness. Through a quiet decision, made deep within the soul, I no longer want this to live inside me. This isn't easy. Especially when you were hurt unfairly, when there was no apology, when justice never came. The mind wants closure, the heart wants acknowledgement. But the truth is, waiting for someone else to make peace for you is another trap. It hands your healing to the very person who broke you. And if they never return, never explain, never make it right, where does that leave you? Stuck, half alive, angry in the dark. But there is another path, one the world rarely teaches, the path where you choose to stop reliving the betrayal, not because it didn't matter, but because you matter more. You stop rehearsing the story, stop needing them to understand. Stop keeping score in your mind, and instead you reclaim the space they've occupied inside you, not with bitterness, but with breath, with stillness, with presence. Letting go of resentment is not forgetting, it's not pretending. It's simply no longer allowing someone else's actions to define your energy. It's choosing not to let a past wound become a permanent identity. It's walking forward, even with a scar, but not with a chain. That shift from remembering to releasing doesn't make you weak. It makes you sovereign. It means you've stopped waiting for an apology and started living as your own answer. And the beauty of silent healing is that no one needs to know. You don't have to announce that you've moved on. You don't need a stage or a speech. The most powerful transformations happen quietly. They are not proven by how loud you speak, but by how light you feel. One morning, you wake up, and it doesn't sting anymore. One evening, you see their face in your memory, and there is no tightening in your chest, just a quiet knowing. It's done. That is the power you hold. To forgive not because they asked, but because your peace matters more than your pride. To release, not because they deserve it, but because you do. To choose stillness over bitterness, presence over replay, freedom over fury. And in that silence, you'll find a kind of strength that no one can take from you. So today, if resentment still lingers in the corners of your mind, don't try to fight it. Don't feed it more stories. Just breathe. Let the silence do the work. Let it melt what no amount of talking ever could. Because you are not what they did. You are what you choose to do next. And the next step begins with a whisper, not a war. With release, not revenge. With you standing still and finally free. 8. Quit sharing your plans with everyone. There is a kind of peace that only silence can guard, a clarity that only grows when it is protected from the noise of outside opinions, projections, and premature applause. That's why when you decide to change something in your life, to grow, to begin, to move in a new direction, the wisest move isn't to announce it, it's to hold it, quietly, closely, as if your idea were a fragile seed still pushing its first root into the dark. Because it is. Every time you speak a dream too early, something subtle is lost. Not your confidence, not your resolve, but the stillness that anchors your focus. When you share your plans with others, even with good intentions, the energy of the dream begins to leak. The pressure to perform sets in. Expectations begin to form. You start to picture their reactions, their judgments, their approval, or lack of it. And slowly you begin to build your vision not from the inside out, but from the outside in. What was once an intimate spark becomes a performance waiting for applause. The Stoics knew this intimately. They spoke of keeping the inner citadel strong, of protecting your reason, your intention, your essence, from distraction, from corruption, from the false sense of progress that comes from merely speaking instead of doing. Words feel like action. They release dopamine. They trick the mind into thinking a step has been taken, but nothing in the real world has moved. The idea hasn't matured, hasn't endured discomfort, hasn't struggled forward. It has only been aired and exposed. When you talk too soon, you invite interpretation. You open yourself to doubt, not always from others but from within. Someone says, "Are you sure?" And suddenly you're not. Someone jokes, "That sounds ambitious," and now your clarity is fogged. Even compliments can trap you. The praise makes you afraid to fail. The encouragement binds you to a version of success that might not even be yours. Before long, your goal is no longer yours at all. It's been shaped by the echo of outside voices. This is why silence is a form of emotional self-mastery. It protects the soul of your intentions. It gives your plans time to grow roots before they're asked to bear fruit. It keeps you honest. If no one is watching, you must act from something deeper than attention. You move because the path is right, not because it will be seen. You persist because it matters, not because it will be praised. And that kind of effort, born from solitude and purpose, is unshakable. Silence doesn't mean isolation. It doesn't mean secrecy born of fear. It means discernment. It means knowing that not everything sacred needs to be shared. There's a kind of strength in restraint. What you're building matters more than who knows about it. You can still ask for help. You can still seek guidance, but do it wisely. Share with those who nurture, not those who scrutinize. Speak only when the words will serve the work, not the ego. There is also a certain beauty in letting the result speak for itself. Let your presence reveal your path. Let your actions carry the weight of your intent. You don't have to explain the change, become the change. You don't have to justify your direction, walk it with quiet certainty. When people finally notice, it won't be because you told them. It will be because your life has become undeniable proof of your transformation. I've walked this path myself. I've learned that the most meaningful shifts happen without announcement, not because they are small, but because they are sacred. And sacred things deserve protection. When I stopped sharing my every plan, I discovered something unexpected. I felt more powerful, more rooted, less reactive. There was no longer a need for feedback to validate my direction, no more craving for applause, just me, my values, and the road in front of me. So if you're carrying a dream, a decision, a quiet change, protect it. Let it breathe in solitude. Let it grow where no one else can touch. You don't need permission to begin. You don't need validation to continue. You don't even need to be understood right now. What you need is space, stillness. The deep trust that the silence you keep is not emptiness, it is strength being born. And when the time is right, when the roots have run deep, and the direction has become part of who you are, you won't need to say a word. Your actions will speak, and they'll say everything that ever needed to be said, and more. 9. Cut down on negative input, news, gossip. Peace isn't something you stumble into, it's something you protect. And in a world that shouts from every direction, your ability to filter what enters your mind has become a matter of survival, not just serenity. The truth is, your inner world doesn't collapse because of one big blow. It erodes slowly, quietly. Each headline was soaked in fear. Each comment was soaked in sarcasm. Each conversation was soaked in complaint. Day by day, your clarity gets buried under noise that was never yours to carry. Most people don't realize this. They wake up and reach for the news out of habit, scroll through headlines, not to be informed but to stay stimulated. They hear gossip and don't stop it because it passes the time. They tune into conflict, not because it helps, but because it feeds something restless inside them. And then they wonder why they feel anxious, why their patience is thin, why their thoughts never settle. But when you feed the mind garbage, it can't produce peace. When your attention is scattered across every crisis, your presence vanishes from your own life. The Stoics understood this long before social media ever existed. They spoke of guarding your reason, choosing your inputs carefully, and focusing only on what is within your control. Because they knew, distraction is not neutral. It pulls you from yourself. It steals the space where strength is built. It floods your awareness until your own thoughts are no longer your own. Silence, then, is not just about not speaking. It's about protecting what you allow in. It's about choosing carefully what you listen to, what you watch, and what you give your energy to. And this isn't about becoming ignorant. It's not about hiding from the world or pretending pain doesn't exist. It's about drawing the line between being informed and being infected, between being aware and being consumed. The line is subtle, but real. One side fuels your ability to act. The other side drowns your spirit under noise you can't change. And you'll know you've crossed it when your mind starts echoing the very chaos you wanted to avoid. This matters because everything you consume, from conversations to content, becomes part of your mental environment. And just like your physical surroundings shape your stress, your thoughts are shaped by what you let echo inside. If your daily diet is arguments, outrage, and sarcasm, you can't expect your inner world to feel grounded. You can't expect patience or resilience or wisdom to rise from a soil poisoned by static. So the question becomes, what would your life feel like if you started choosing silence over spectacle? What would happen if you muted the outrage, closed the gossip tab, and left the argument unread? What if your morning didn't begin with the crisis, but with breath? What if you gave your peace the same protection you give your passwords? Cutting down negative input is not dramatic. You don't need to delete every app or abandon every conversation. You just need to pause, to become intentional, to say, this doesn't serve me, and let it go without noise, without announcement, because this work is quiet. But its effects are loud. It shifts how you show up, how you speak, and how you think. You begin to see the world more clearly, not because it changed, but because you're no longer viewing it through the fog of 1,000 voices. I've seen what happens when this shift takes root. I've lived the difference between a mind pulled in 20 directions and a mind rooted in stillness. And it begins not with a grand resolution, but with a choice made in silence. To curate what enters, to close the door gently on what drains you, to let the world shout while you remain unmoved. Peace is not the absence of problems, it's the absence of pointless noise. And when you start removing what clouds your mental clarity, you begin to remember who you are beneath the opinions, the updates, the echo chambers. You rediscover the depth of your own awareness. You come home to your mind, and that's where the real power begins, not in knowing more, not in reacting faster, but in choosing less with purpose. In choosing silence where once there was distraction, stillness where once there was stimulation, and meaning where once there was just motion. Not everyone will understand this shift, but you will feel it, and that's enough. Let them keep scrolling, let them keep shouting. You protect your peace in silence. Peace is not something you chase, it's something you clear the path for. And that path most often is silent. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need applause, agreement, or permission. What you need is clarity, stillness, the strength to walk away from habits that drown your inner calm, and the courage to guard your mind like sacred ground. Letting go doesn't mean losing. It means reclaiming your space, your focus, your quiet, one choice at a time. The noise of the world will keep knocking, but you decide who gets in. You decide what shapes your emotions, what deserves your energy, and what earns your response. That's Stoic strength. Not in force, but in restraint. Not in dominance, but in detachment. Silence is not weakness. It is the purest form of power when guided by self-mastery. So as this video ends, let something else begin. A quiet revolution inside you. One habit, one thought, one reaction at a time. You don't have to shout that you've changed. Just change. And if something from this journey spoke to you, leave your truth in the comments. Your story might be the silence someone else needs to hear.